Have you thought about the deeper questions about life and existence and stuff like that? Yeah.
And I'm still, I don't know.
But how do you believe that everything started? Like, how did it all begin?
I think,
In terms of your worldview?
I think a theistic explanation solves a lot of problems, but also creates problems.
So you're saying you're a student of philosophy?
Philosophy and politics.
Philosophy and politics?
Yeah.
Are you going to go into politics? Because you know most politicians, they study PPE, isn't it?
Yeah.
Philosophy,
And economics.
politics and economics, exactly, mostly in Oxford.
So it's kind of frontline politics is horrible.
Yeah, it's not. In terms of,
Yeah.
are we right? In terms of university, you're in London or you're in Oxford? Oh, right. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Okay, so this will make for a more fruitful conversation, I think, to hear kind of your aspect. And have you thought about the deeper questions about life and existence and stuff like that?
I like to think I have, but then, I'm only 21.
Okay, does it come up in universities and schools?
Yeah, so, I did a bit of it kind of just for fun.
Okay.
Just to kind of the question which I kind of think about the most is, and this is probably directly pertinent to your channel, is whether God exists or not.
Yeah.
And I'm still, I don't know. It's on the fence.
Okay.
But I think there's some quite strong theistic arguments which can be made. And I think there's some things from which theism provides. I also think it's important to separate. I also think, and this is obviously a problematic thing to say, I think it's important to separate between the question of should one be a member of a community, and if so, a religious community is probably a sufficient community for that.
Before we even jump into that, I just want to say you come across as a very open-minded, balanced person, because most people, they jump in and say, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in a God, and then halfway through the discussion, they say, you know what, I'm not an atheist, I'm an agnostic. So you do seem like
agnostics are as bad as like lived ants. They can't make up their mind.
Whoa, let's not go.
Or pescatarians.
Oh my God.
I'm joking. Just make your mind up.
Shots fired, yeah.
I'm joking. Or pescatarians are the worst.
Okay.
I can give you the vegan rant another. That could be another topic.
All right. So Adam, let's just start off from the basic. I'm sure we don't need to come up with the yardstick of logic and using common sense. I'm sure we're going to do that anyway. But how do you believe that everything started? Like, how did it all begin?
I think,
in terms of your worldview.
I think a theistic explanation solves a lot of problems, but also creates problems.
We'll come to that.
Okay.
Let's deal with. I want to understand you.
I don't know. I'll take it. I have lots of ideas which many people have said to me and I've thought about, which I think are like somewhat plausible and kind of you can do it. It also depends what we mean by what do we mean by things begun.
Okay.
Which of course, by just asking that question, we're implying that there was a point where things began, and I'm not sure if we can prove that necessarily.
So you don't accept the Big Bang?
The Big Bang. I'm not a physicist. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have an A level in physics.
Whoa, you have an A level in physics?
The evidence presented to me in terms of as physics A level went, seemed to kind of show that the Big Bang was a good enough explanation in terms of physically why the universe started.
And that's something you accept?
And I'm relatively happy to accept that. On the basis of that kind of, the physical evidence of the universe kind of seems to point, kind of the universe expanding and kind of the cosmic background radiation all seems to point.
Redshift and all that.
Yeah, all that sort of stuff kind of seems to point to the Big Bang. What exactly that was, I don't understand. I'm not sure if it makes sense for me to say I understand what that was, because...
Are you talking about what created the Big Bang, or are you talking about the procedure?
What happened? So what happened before the Big Bang, if that makes sense to us? Because there's one school of thought which goes, maybe it doesn't even make sense to say what happened before the Big Bang. You say, the Big Bang was the beginning. That's when time started. How can we say before time? What does that mean?
But theoretically, there would be something.
Theoretically, I don't.
Just because we don't have an understanding,
Because we don't understand it doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't exist.
Perfect.
But I'm not sure. But the problem is once we start making like an appeal to things which like potentially beyond human comprehension, I think then we're on very dodgy ground in terms of like how we want to proceed further. In that, if we already accept that we can't understand it, and we have a good reason for thinking we can't understand it, like we shouldn't give up, but we should go like, well, we need to think about why this is.
Let me give you one argument of design, and this is mostly based upon probability. Yeah, are you familiar with someone called Fred Hoyle, Professor Fred Hoyle?
I've heard of him.
Yeah, so
I can't claim to know that.
no problem. He was a physicist as well. So he was looking at how we came across the elementary matter of carbon. Yeah, and the way you get carbon is by getting 3 helium molecules together. Yeah, but when he brought 3 helium molecules together, it just wasn't happening. Yeah, and it was just really frustrating for him. And then long story short, he realized that you needed to have the nuclear ground state energy to be within 1% for the carbons to form for life. Yeah? And in fact, Sir Fred Hoyle actually said that because of how precise this actually is, that actually shook his atheism. Now you might think, okay, that's 1%. Now, even the position of Earth in relation to the sun, it's within, you've heard of the Goldilocks zone, yeah. That is within 2%.
I think there's a.
Let me just give you a few of these. Yeah. So that's within 2%.
I'm sure you've heard the argument about that.
Well, yeah, probably. So the Earth and the Sun has to be within 2% distance. If it's too far, of course, we freeze. If it's too close, we burn. Yeah, that's 1%. That's 2%. Now, if I go further, and I say, if we look at the atom, and the atom and the precise balance of the forces of the nuclear strong force and the electromagnetic force has to be within 1 in 10 to the power 55. 1 in 10 to the power 55.
I've heard an argument on
Exactly. But the numbers, Adam, are astounding. If I was to, now this number, 1 in 10 to the power 55, you might think, okay, fair enough. However, when you look initially, even when, forget initially, even you've heard of dark energy, yeah? Or is that yours?
Yeah.
You've had dark energy, yeah?
Just like to say that. That's what fell off.
No problem.
No, continue speaking.
Yeah, so you've heard of dark energy, yeah?
Yeah.
So dark energy is so precise that statisticians or physicists, you can clip it on here. Yeah. It's actually 1 in 10 to the power 120. These numbers, do you see?
I see where this is going.
And there's like 5, 6 that I can give you. I can say, do you see?
I think.
Now my question, let me end with a question. So the question is this, that yes, we may be aware of these numbers, but when we actually look at how improbable, close to impossible that it actually is, surely it points towards the designer.
So I think the problem with that is, so I think we can explain those facts entirely on the atheistic worldview. And I think we can do it without necessarily positing the existence of multiverse or anything like that. Which is, we can say, okay, for anyone to have a comprehension of how kind of unlikely it is, it's a necessary condition of that comprehension that all these things are the right way. Okay? And so the fact that we can look back and go, the probability of it, that these things happen the way they are, is actually 1 in 1. Because there's no way in a universe where these things didn't line up that we would be able to look at them. So yeah, it's amazing when we look at that, and I agree it's an impressive fact about science, but we're looking back retrospectively at a necessary cause of our existence, and that's a necessary cause of us working out the probability in the first place. So it's fine. Like, we can explain it. We can understand why that's the case.
Just rephrase that.
I explained that really badly.
Yeah.
Okay. So, in order for it to be the case that you can stand here or I can stand here, for life to exist at all, it's necessary that all those things are the way they are. Okay? So there's no world in which an intelligent being exists in which it can't look back and go, oh, look at all these coincidences. Okay? So, the fact that we can look back and go, there's all these coincidences, doesn't prove there's a designer, just prove that there exists intelligent life, and obviously if there exists intelligent life, there exist the necessary conditions for intelligent life.
But then,
it's not exceptional.
But then don't we see, even in our solar system, that if our planet was too close to the sun, then we have a Mercury, isn't it? And then if it was further away, then we have a Venus.
If, say, Earth was a Mercury, then there wouldn't be us. We wouldn't be looking back. There's no way any being can look back and go, look at all these coincidences without that being having to exist. So it's not special that these things happen.
But the fact that we do exist, and that's why Hugh Ross says the fact that a planet like ours exists in the solar system is 1 in 10 to the power 30. Yeah?
Right, but say it doesn't happen. Okay, then we don't get to look at it.
Exactly, then we don't exist, isn't it?
Right, exactly. And so that means that,
then there would be no fine-tuning argument.
Well, then there'll be no people, there'll be no fine-tuning argument, there'll be no nothing.
Exactly.
So it doesn't matter.
Then
it doesn't prove the designer. It just proves that if the conditions...
Am I correct in assuming that you're saying if we didn't...
I'm really sorry. I apologise to anyone watching, I've been really inarticulate.
So, because I'm just trying to understand, you're saying these wouldn't make sense if we didn't have what we have.
They're not improbable, because once you understand it, to understand probability, these improbable things have to happen. So it's not improbable at all.
No, but isn't the fact that we're here reflective of the fact that it is remarkable?
Right, but there's no way we could be here in which those things wouldn't happen. So it's not special. The fact that it's not special that those things.
So you're.
It's not special. Sorry, I've explained myself. It's not special that we're able to look back and go, those things happened, which is really what your argument is saying. Because there's no world in which a person can look back and go, isn't it special those things happened? Because those things didn't happen, because then that person doesn't exist.
I think all I'm saying
I'm
is.
trying to explain.
No problem. It's trial and error, isn't it? Maybe I'm making a mistake. But I guess what I'm trying to say is the fact that we're here as conscious beings that question our existence, that live harmoniously, that we have such adapted creatures around us, and then we look at the kind of situations that actually that have led up to this. It surely does lead to the fact that you can't have so many coincidences, one after another, leading to our existence.
Right. So I'm not knowledgeable enough about any of the...
No, I'm not trying to catch you out here.
I'm not knowledgeable. I'll try to explain myself again, because I don't think I've made it clear. Okay. Or maybe I haven't understood it myself. Maybe that's
Okay. I was thinking it's good to see the eyes as well, isn't it?
Okay, so what you're saying is I'm not disputing that we're conscious beings and these things are improbable. I'm just interpreting the facts the other way around. So I'm saying, as a conscious being, it's a necessary condition that all these coincidences must have taken place for me to exist. And so for you to be able to say, isn't it coincidental that these things happen the way they did? That doesn't prove that God did, because that doesn't...
Let me just interject.
There's no way that you could have existed.
It might save us time.
Yeah.
I think my point is the fact that we are here.
Yeah.
The fact that everything is...
But if we weren't here, we wouldn't be able to look back and go how improbable it was.
Exactly.
So it's not an argument for design. It's just shown that, oh look, we exist and it's improbable, which is an interesting fact. I don't see the leap to God.
Yeah, it does seem like what you're saying actually proves my point, because you're saying had those things not been in place, we wouldn't be here.
Right, the argument you're making is not actually. So there's your existence is a necessary condition of you making that argument.
Of course.
Right, exactly. So the actual argument you're making is not an argument to kind of these improbable things happen when I exist. You don't accept your body. These improbable things happen, and I'm able to look at them. Okay. And so for anyone to be able to look at them, those impossible things think so. Okay, let's
I think I see where you're coming from.
I'll take this from a completely different way. Let's talk about possible worlds. Okay, so we exist. We don't need to take an opinion on what possible world actually means, but we'll say there exists a near infinite amount of possible worlds. Okay, some of those possible worlds, the things which you've described, so let's take the view that kind of we can imagine every single possible world. So let's take one example, which you gave, which was the easiest one for me to understand is the Earth being near the Sun. So let's take a possible world in which the Earth is actually not where it is. The Earth is where Mercury is. Okay? When the Earth is near Mercury, okay, then humans can't develop, evolution can't happen, life can't happen. So no one in that possible world can look, can kind of go, look, it was really improbable that things would be the way they are. Okay, and that's the vast majority of possible worlds. What I'm just saying is, in any possible world in which there's a human being who can look back and go, I'm conscious, I can observe these things, it must have already have been the case that that was the possible world in which the conditions were correct in order to create life. And so, yeah, it's unusual, but say those possible worlds, in a possible world in which those things aren't correct, we can't look at it. So that we can look at it doesn't mean God, it just means, we happen to be living in the possible world in which that's happening. Do you understand what
I understand where you're coming from.
I've been really inarticulate.
But I think maybe let's just...
Immense amount of editing, please.
I think maybe what you're saying is, let's just say we were on Venus and we were adapted to Venus.
I'm not saying we're on Venus, I'm saying, say we were in a universe.
In another, yeah.
In a universe in which Earth was where Venus was, then no one can look back and go, it's a probability. So that we can look back and go, there's a probability, that means that all that just shows is, we exist. And I think, we exist. It's a great fact. I'm pleased about it.
Okay. All right. I think we're kind of hitting a wall maybe here with the fine tuning. But let's just say, even if we go back to the cause of the Big Bang.
Yeah.
What is your kind of interpretation of what caused the Big Bang?
So as I understand it, and this is something I will accept my understanding of and my thinking about is more limited. Is I don't know, and I'm not sure if I can know. And maybe that's just me being stupid, but I think if we say there's a cause of the Big Bang, so we'll accept that the Big Bang was the beginning of the physical universe.
So you accept that you don't know what caused the Big Bang, is that what you're saying?
I don't really know that.
Okay.
But I don't think if you make an argument that God caused it, I'm not sure if I can understand as a being which exists basically entirely in the physical world. I'm not going to I don't really buy any of this kind of mind-body dualism business.
Okay, what about if I said that?
Sorry.
No problem.
We should run about 6.
So time and space started at the Big Bang, yeah? So naturally, somebody that is causing the Big Bang, that's creating everything, because as the brother was telling you before, when an explosion happens, normally we haven't come across any issue or any instance where an explosion has happened and we're happy and we're saying, a bomb has gone off, maybe a building has been
the point is the Big Bang is an explosion.
It's not an
The
explosion.
Big Bang is not an explosion. Well, not in the... So, as far as I understand it, and this is based on a relatively rudimentary understanding of physics, is the Big Bang is not an explosion as we understand it, in that I don't really understand how this makes sense, but is that everything existed in a singularity, and then something happens and everything starts coming out. An explosion is completely different. An explosion is when you have a sudden release of energy, and that creates all sorts of...
Isn't that the Big Bang, the sudden release of energy?
Energy, because it kind of,
Because we did need energy.
Explosion, we have something before.
Well, we needed...
before...
But you're saying singularity was there.
So energy and matter are kind of the same thing. Whatever that means, who knows. But kind of, the issue is that kind of, if you want to say there's something physical before the Big Bang, which maybe is a legitimate view, I don't know enough about physics in this case. So if you want to say that kind of everything before the Big Bang was physical, that seems like an acceptable thing. But the problem is, once we get before the Big Bang, we can't look at it. So we're in a problematic territory in that the way we do science isn't working too well.
I think the point that I'm trying to say is, let's just say time, matter, space, whatever you want to call it, started at the Big Bang.
Okay.
Surely somebody who's directing that's because there seems to be some sort of intentionality behind creation. Yeah, there's order.
I agree.
Logically speaking,
I agree with you, and I think this is part of the reason why, like, especially on an emotional level, I'm probably to some extent drawn towards, and this is more an emotional argument than a rational argument, which is, I agree, which is emotionally it's so much more appealing.
let's just say, should we just clip it on there? I think, yeah, because it was just.
Oh, sorry, yeah. So I think on an emotional level, it's so much more appealing. The kind of the worldview you've just presented, which is that creation has a purpose. You know, we kind of don't exist. I agree.
But let's just keep it on logic then.
I think that's far more appealing, and I think that's probably part of the reason why I'd be inclined to kind of.
But I would say even logically speaking though, it does make sense. Because when you look at order rather than chaos, yeah, when you look at ecosystems, when you look at how, for example, how we are adapted, consciousness, how there is love.
I think we can explain most of those things like evolution.
Okay.
I'm not an evolutionary scientist myself.
Because I was listening to your evolution discussion.
But I think evolution provides a sufficient explanation for that. And I think evolution provides an explanation which is satisfactory.
Do you believe evolution as fact or as a working model?
So I think it's obviously kind of all science is just a model. So in the same sense that so obviously kind of that the Earth goes around the sun and not the other way around is just a model. But I think kind of there's a question of kind of how close you want your kind of your model to be to kind of the way reality is. But I think in kind of, and this is kind of a slightly long-winded way of explaining it, which is like in the same way that the Earth going around the sun is a model, I think that evolution is also a model in that it accurately reflects what happens in reality.
Accurately, right?
Yes.
Okay, so
and there's lots of ways we can see that, kind of even within your own body.
I think you're confusing basic evolution with Darwinian evolution, because it's Darwinian evolution that you believe in, isn't it?
You're going to have to explain to me what you understand the distinction to be.
Yeah. So basic evolution is like you're going to give me the example of antibiotics.
I wasn't.
Well,
I was going to talk about the appendix.
But just because we don't understand,
Okay.
we can come to that. But before you were talking about moths, industrial moths.
Okay.
Yeah, even though that's been disproven. Let's just say for argument's sake.
I'll take your word for it. It's been disproven. I'm not an evolutionary scientist.
Yeah. So let's just say, so that's considered basic evolution. Darwinian evolution extrapolates and makes bigger claims. Yeah. That
So
before.
what's the definitional difference?
Of,
So what's the difference between? It's just the extent to which the claims are made.
Like, for example, the one that you're referring to is mostly based on natural selection. And natural selection was actually discovered before Darwin.
Right.
And even when we say evolution, there's no one evolution. There's at least 4 working models of evolution. And there's...
Can you delineate?
Yeah, for example, there's 2 main ones that I'm aware of. I mean,
I'm not a biologist. I'm not going to claim to.
yeah, there's one that I was reading upon a couple of days ago, and Sabur Ahmed mentioned as well.
Okay.
It's Neo-Lamarckian evolution, which rather than survival of the fittest, that actually talks more about community and cohesion.
Okay.
And it talks about how we have certain bacteria that live harmoniously and benefit off each other.
And you can have an argument between different kind of, but they all agree on the same sort of fundamental.
Not necessarily,
premises.
but because
Surely they all agree on the premise that they all agree kind of on the basic premise that kind of that there's a selection process out there. Whatever the selection criteria is, because that's the difference which you've explained it. Well, you're saying that some people believe in selection criteria X, some people believe in selection criteria Y. There's some sort of selection criteria. Maybe those are like equivalent to each other. I'm not going to pretend to. But I think they agree, and I think whichever one of those is correct, and if such a thing as correct exists, we can reasonably say that we can explain the natural world as we see it.
but seeing as there's various models, and you're unable to kind of pin down
But that's an argument for your model.
Yeah.
That's not an argument for your model.
No.
That's just saying I've got these differences. I need to find a way of resolving them. That doesn't in any way indicate this other model, which kind of adopts with a completely different set of premises, of which the evidence for is.
What I'm trying to say is, you said evolution is a sufficient enough answer for you, and all I've said is I questioned which evolution.
So
And then I guess what I'm trying to say is the fact that you're unaware of these different evolutions, the different implications that these evolutions have, it doesn't show a solid kind of grounding of
I'm
yours.
not claiming, but I don't think. But what we're not trying to do is judge between different types of evolution. I'm assuming I'm assuming you're not. I'm sure there's an interesting conversation which I'm not really qualified to have between different biologists as to which evolution is sufficient. But that's not what we're trying to do.
You know what?
We're trying to do is we're trying to distinguish between a kind of a model of the natural world which posits the existence of God creating it, and a model which posits a gradual kind of evolution over time by some sort of selection criteria, resulting in changes which kind of gradually kind of together make a human being. Well, that implies some sort of purpose to evolution.
The thing, Adam, is that each time we kind of go towards a conversation, you get quite worried. And you say, oh, you know what, I'm not really... yeah, but the thing, Adam, is this is a conversation with yourself and your worldview and your understanding. You don't have to... I'm not asking you to represent all of atheists or all of philosophers.
I'm not claiming to really have an opinion, even if it's possible to know that God exists.
Yeah, and that's absolutely fine, Adam. But the thing is, what we're trying to get to the bottom of is your understanding and finding gaps in there and seeing, okay, where have these gaps emerged from?
I don't think a kind of theistic. I don't think a theistic explanation for. I don't think a theistic explanation.
So
I'm really sorry.
no problem. It's fine.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Hope this video was helpful for you. This may help others too, so please consider sharing, and we will bring more videos in the future, inshallah. So consider subscribing.